NYU. Ever heard of it? Pretty famous university. That'll cost you $58,000 per year. From the astronomical cost of cell phone plans in the US to food costs that are going to empty your wallet in America, there are quite a few things that are a lot more expensive in the USA than in the UK, and in this video, we're gonna go over some of them. A lot of people often think of things that are more expensive in the UK than in the US. I feel like you've all heard the story of the person, or been the person yourself, who goes on holiday to the US and ends up buying tons of clothes from the outlet malls, as we call them, because it's cheaper in the US than in the UK, but not everything is affordable in the US. In fact, a lot of it isn't. Now let's start with groceries, because this is talked about a lot on the internet, and it's true. When directly compared, groceries or food items in the US tend to be about 30 to 50% more expensive than in the UK. Honestly, when I go back to the US to visit, some of the prices are honestly so shocking that I don't even end up buying some of my favorite American foods that I've been missing for years, because I cannot fathom paying $7 for a box of cheese crackers or something equally insane. Part of this has to do with competition. So the US has quite a lack of competition in the supermarket and grocery space, unlike in the UK where the market is saturated and there are plenty of options. Stores like Aldi that are cheaper are making inroads in the US, but this is only in recent years. It was a big deal when an Aldi came to my local town a few years ago, as before then we only had about 2 options for grocery stores. Whereas in the UK, I can easily think of how to get to the local Waitrose, Morrisons, Asda, Tesco, Sainsbury's, and Co-op at least, probably more, from my house. Number 2 is mobile phone plans. So another absolutely shocking difference when you really get down to the numbers between UK and USA prices is cell phone plans or mobile phone plans. My plan here in the UK costs about £10 a month, and honestly, I don't even know the amount of data and minutes because there is so much of it that I would never run out, so I don't even think about it. And I'm on my phone a lot, so that's £10 per month. In the US, per person, they call the $50 US phone plans the cheaper options, and most people tend to be paying anywhere from $75 to $100 at least per month for their cell phone plan. Again, this comes down to lack of competition for one thing. So compared to the UK, the USA just doesn't have as many providers, thus they can up their prices. It also does cost more to serve the larger geographical area in the US, which has a less densely populated country than in the UK, making prices higher yet again. The next thing on my list is kind of a fun one, but that's Broadway versus the West End tickets. So it's kind of more niche, but tickets for the West End are usually a lot cheaper than Broadway in New York City for the same quality of show. The West End has some of the best theater in the whole world, and yet the ticket prices for the absolute best seats in the West End are typically the prices for some of the cheapest and pretty bad seats on Broadway. When visitors come to the UK to see me, they are always surprised at how many shows they can fit in on their budget, because you can get some tickets in the West End for as low as £20 if you're willing to have a restricted view. And I saw this post, which made me laugh, and it was titled, "Is American theater expensive or am I just poor?" So yeah, you're not imagining it. American theater is typically very expensive, and you get more for your money for West End shows. Next up is healthcare. Everybody knows healthcare is much more expensive in the US than in the UK, because in the UK, technically, as long as you use the NHS as a UK citizen, you pay nothing. You pay through your taxes, yes, if you are tax paying, but you don't get a bill at the end of a hospital stay, a doctor visit, or, giving birth to a child. In the US, the average cost before insurance of giving birth is around $20,000, depending on potential complications. That can be reduced to around $3,000 or $4,000 with insurance, but then you're also paying for health insurance. The average annual cost of health insurance in the US is around $7,000 for an individual and $20,000 for a family per year. This came up in my video about UK versus USA ambulances. The thought of needing to pay for an ambulance in the UK doesn't cross most people's minds. If you have a heart attack and need to be transported to the hospital, you're not going to get a bill for the service. But in the UK, you are, typically to the tune of a few $1,000s. This is definitely one of the more serious items on my list, as the cost of healthcare in the US can completely bankrupt families or individuals through no fault of their own. There are many things that you can't control in life, even if you are the healthiest and you exercise daily and you're in picture perfect health. Sometimes life has other plans, and it's terrifying for many Americans who end up with so much healthcare debt. This isn't a fear in the UK. Next is car insurance. Car insurance estimates in the UK yearly are obviously based on like the age that you are, the car you drive, where you live, where you keep the car, if you're a good driver like some people or a bad driver like me. But typically you're looking at around 400 to 800 pounds per year, which seems a lot to Brits, as car insurance prices have been rising in the UK, but Americans are typically paying a lot more. The average cost of US car insurance is over $2,000 per year. There was another funny exchange I found online when a British person commented that they had met a young person, they were a male, who was driving a sports car, an American, and this person told the British person that their car insurance costs around $300. So the British person was like amazed. They were posting online going, how can it be this cheap? And all the Americans had to come online and to say, actually that's gonna be the monthly price. American car insurance can be such a hefty fee that we talk about it in the US in a monthly context. So that person was not paying $300 per year, but per month. Next on my list is higher education. Higher education is another one of those incredible figures when you dig into the numbers. In England, a university can charge a home student a maximum of £9,250 per year, which is about 13,000 US dollars, which again, I know there's been lots of like reporting in the UK that people, or in England rather, that people find this very expensive. The costs are rising and it seems an astronomical cost. It's certainly not cheap. I mean, it's like 10,000 pounds per year. However, in the US, wait for it, there are some universities, particularly with their in-state tuition, as we call it, where tuition fees can be under $10,000, but most aren't. The cheapest tuition for the University of Pittsburgh, for example, is $21,000 per year. The University of Florida, if you're an in-state student, you're a resident in the state, it's gonna run you about 6,000 US dollars per year. Okay. Kind of makes sense. But for every other US student, so from every other state in the US, you're looking at 28 grand. And these are small numbers. Harvard, over 50 grand per year. 50,000 US dollars. At least that's just for tuition. That's not for what we call room and board and all the rest. NYU, ever heard of it? Pretty famous university. That'll cost you $58,000 per year. Even the international student fees in England for universities do not touch these absurd numbers, so often students moving from the US to the UK to study, even paying the more expensive international fees, are basically looking at a bargain. And finally, and on a lighter note, there are so many free museums in the UK, particularly in the capital city of London. Everything from the British Museum to the Natural History Museum to the Tate Modern and Tate Britain, the Science Museum. You can keep listing them. There's a lot of world-renowned museums. These are not like dinky little museums, and they're completely free. In the US, free museums do exist, but they're not as much of a thing as in the UK. If you're going to New York City, you're looking at like $26 a person for the Museum of Natural History, $24 for the famous Museum of Modern Art, etc. Luckily, in Washington, D.C., we do have the Smithsonian, which is quite a world-famous collection of museums, which are free, as well as more free options than in New York City. But overall, I would say there are more cultural subsidies in the UK that can lower the price of these experiences for people, if not making a lot of them completely free. Now that brings me to the end of this list. Comment below on which one surprised you the most. I would love to hear your thoughts. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.